Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon for some of the people who may be sitting in different time zones, and good evening as well. Today, we are going to do a workshop on ISO 45001 Occupational Health and Safety Management System and how it can help to manage the recent workforce challenges. With me, we have Kathy Fisher, which is our co-founder, which is the founder and president of Question and my co-presenter for today's workshop. A little intro about myself. I'm Syed Arshad Hashmi, the training manager at Bureau Veritas Certification North America. I am a lead auditor and trainer in a number of ISO standards, starting from quality, environment, health and safety, information security, business continuity, energy management, and asset management, and anti-bribery management system, which is a new standard, ISO 37001. By profession, I'm an engineer. I have 25 years of experience working into this field of international standards and certifications. Before joining Bureau Veritas, I was working as a consultant. So I worked for 16 years as a consultant and provided my consulting services to almost 140 consulting assignments and got the chance of working in a lot of industrial sectors. Then I conducted numerous trainings and audits throughout USA, Canada, Europe, Thailand, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and throughout the Middle East and in Pakistan. I'm also an IRCA registered trainer for a number of international standards, and I'm also certified in risk and information system control by ISACA. So that is a brief about myself, and I would request Kathy to go ahead and introduce herself.
Yes, thank you, Arshad. My name is Kathy Fisher. I'm the founder and president of Quistum. We work with automotive manufacturers and helping them transform their management systems into money-making machines by embedding their management system processes into their day-to-day operations. We have done a lot of work over the past several years with the Occupational Health and Safety Management System standard, especially with the recent release of the ISO 45001, replacing OHSMS 18001 Occupational Health and Safety Assessment Procedures. We really focus on promoting the integration, especially of occupational health and safety management, into organizations' quality, environmental, and other management systems so that you can gain the best results for your customers, but at the same time taking care of the people inside of your organization. We're looking forward to sharing with you today how occupational health and safety management based on ISO 45001 can help you overcome workforce challenges that you may be facing today.
Thank you, Kathy. And a little intro about the company, Bureau Veritas. So Bureau Veritas is the global leader in testing, inspection, and certification. And our mission is to shape a world of trust by reducing client risk, improving their performance, and helping them innovate to meet challenges of quality, health safety, environmental protection, and social responsibility. As you can see, we are geographically present everywhere. Alone in North America, we have around 6,000 employees, and we have around 150 offices and labs, all in 50 states of US and in Canada. So the certification that we offer are all these related to health safety, quality, environment, food safety, social accountability, security, and others. And we provide trainings against all these international standards and certifications that we offer. This is our clientele, global clientele. As you can see, there are a number of key clients that we have around the globe. And this is the agenda for today's workshop. And I would request Kathy to take over the stage and go, please.
Thank you, Arshad. So we want to cover with you today a key focus on how organizations are managing in this rapidly changing work environment. There are challenges they're facing with, especially workforce shortages and the impact that COVID has had in their work environments through the lens of occupational health and safety. So we'll start by taking a look at the current state of occupational health and safety in organizations, and we'll also look at changing worker expectations relative to occupational health and safety, quite a bit of which has been prompted by the COVID crisis. We'll take a look at the impact that worker shortages are having on organizations' occupational health and safety management, and how your organization can leverage your onboarding process with focus on occupational health and safety in order to ensure that people coming into your work environment are safe, not just from COVID, but from other risks that could impact their health and safety. We'd like to also share with you some future trends of occupational health and safety that are really exciting in terms of the expanded focus of occupational health and safety in the workplace. So as we take a look at the current state of occupational health and safety, we'd like to say that a good safety record is no longer enough. Traditionally, organizations focus on their incident rates or perhaps first aids, maybe even near misses. And those are important outcome metrics, but organizations today really have to focus towards, at a basis, fulfilling any compliance obligations regarding legal and regulatory requirements for occupational health and safety. We're going to share with you some insights that have come about just because of the COVID crisis that are really increasing the expectations of organizations in this area of legal and regulatory requirements. But even beyond that, workers expect so much more from their organizations when it comes to occupational health and safety than they ever have in the past. It's not enough to just simply hand a set of safety glasses or other PPE to your workers and tell them to work safe. There's a lot more at stake for organizations, not just financially, but also in being able to attract and retain the best workers in order to ensure the results of the organization and satisfying customers, as well as being a desirable workplace. So as we look at one of the key triggers of change for organizations relative to occupational health and safety, certainly over the past year and a half, every organization has been impacted in some way, shape, or form by COVID-19. This has really impacted how workers are interacting with their workplace in a number of different ways. When we look at in terms of when workers are interacting with their workplaces, now we're seeing things like decoupled work shifts, extended work days, and for some even longer shifts in order to accommodate absenteeism or worker shortage. We're also seeing a trend of a lot more workers working from home when possible in order to support their organization's operations remotely. There's a lot more focus on online work and distance workstations in the physical work environment. This is also leading to social distancing, the need for extra personal protective equipment and other tools like face masks, expanded cleaning time, and we're seeing for many workers where maybe cleaning was not part of their normal work routine, they are expected to accommodate these extra precautions in order to address COVID. We're seeing an increase of virtual meetings and even virtual work that is also changing the dynamic of how we're working with each other. We're seeing a lot more isolation in terms of workers, less team interaction, and in some cases, even less team members. So as we focus on how COVID has changed the workplace, fortunately, there's some really good resources that can help organizations address the impacts that COVID is having in terms of the changes in their work environment and ensuring that we're considering the impact specifically to our workers. Last year, the International Organization for Standardization introduced publicly available standard 45005, which is a guidance document that supports ISO 45001 on occupational health and safety. This PAS, or publicly available standard, is an emergency measure that ISO put together with experts from the field in order to provide guidance to organizations in addressing the impact COVID-19 is having in their workplace, and in particular, leveraging their occupational health and safety management systems in order to return to work while at the same time protecting their workers. The nice thing about this PAS is it closely follows ISO 45001 and does reflect our Plan, Do, Check, Act model that we're so familiar with the ISO standards. You can access this ISO PAS 45005 at the ISO website, www.iso.org. Beyond this ISO guidance, we're finding in every marketplace that organizations, regulators, and legislators are also providing extensive guidance for organizations in addressing COVID in their workplace. Here in the United States, the Occupational Health, Safety and Health Administration has guidance on protecting workers in mitigating and preventing the spread of COVID-19 in the workplace. This is an excellent guide, very practical relative to workplaces and how you can protect your workers from exposure to COVID-19, as well as emergency measures in case COVID-19 shows up in your workplace. It's very clear in detailing employers as well as workers' roles and expectations in responding to COVID-19 and mitigating the spread of COVID-19 in workplace situations. You can access this particular guidance at www.osha.gov, and if you're in a different country, you'll likely find similar guidance that's provided in your area. We look to COVID really being quite a trigger event for organizations relative to occupational health and safety. And I might share that early on last year, when organizations were shutting down because of the spread of COVID in the early 2000s, many client organizations were contacting us about what they could do in order to bring their people back to work. We were encouraging those organizations, especially those that were ISO 45001 certified, to utilize their occupational health and safety management system to help them manage this crisis in their workplace. There's a lot of parallels that exist within ISO 45001 in terms of addressing risk and putting in place controls to manage those risks, as well as handling emergency situations. When we consider how COVID has impacted the workplace and the priority of occupational health and safety, pre-COVID, most organizations had very much of an internal focus when it came to occupational health and safety. They certainly identified safety risks in their work environments, and their focus tended to be on meeting targets. Remember those incident rates or first aids, for instance. And by and large, we also found that for many organizations, they approached occupational health and safety via incremental changes. Certainly, COVID has changed the game. Now we're definitely experiencing the intersection of internal and external risks because of COVID relative to occupational health and safety. We're also much more focused on health risks as well as safety risks in the workplace. And we're really asking ourselves, what really should we be measuring in order to ensure our workers' health and safety? And we're also seeing alongside of this, because of COVID, I'm going to say a workforce that's in chaos. And we're going to talk about the great resignation and workforce shortages that many organizations are currently experiencing. So let's talk about the changing worker expectations of occupational health and safety that have been prompted because of the COVID-19 crisis. Certainly for many workers, they're finding it safer to work from home. And where possible, organizations are accommodating this practice as an ongoing and possibly even permanent work situation. But I want you to keep in mind, when we start thinking about it being safer to work at home, that doesn't absolve an employer of their workers' occupational health and safety. We still have to give consideration to those occupational health and safety risks for people who are performing work from their own location. We're also seeing a big focus on clean being the new safe. And for many employees, as they switch jobs or for those just entering into the workforce, they're very much looking to how organizations are not only addressing safety and health, but also cleanliness in the workplace so that they can make sure that they are not exposed to the COVID virus. Workers also expect a lot more flexibility of their time and space, the space meaning physical space, as well as how they are able to get work done. Workers expect a lot more opportunity to voice their concerns and have input to the decision-making relative to organizations' policies in addressing occupational health and safety. And this is not just a trend because of COVID. Workers are really expecting to have an ongoing voice and have input to those decisions relative to health and safety on all fronts in the organization. So as we think about this need or this desire for workers to have a lot more of a voice and input, This brings about one of the key requirements that we find in ISO 45001 on worker consultation and participation. This is a unique requirement that you don't see in any other ISO standard other than the ISO 45001, and it's emphasized with reference to over 16 other requirements within ISO 45001 about the need to engage workers as part of occupational health and safety in your organization. When we talk about this idea of consultation and participation, this is not just your traditional safety committee. This is really involving the workers from all fronts in establishing policies and making decisions and defining what work is, and even to the extent of defining what health and safety means to the organization itself. We're starting to also see a trend where organizations are being challenged to look beyond traditional occupational health and safety and consider workers' well-being. So when we think about the next consideration impacting occupational health and safety today is these worker shortages. I mentioned a little bit ago the Great Resignation. Has your organization been impacted by a shortage of workers, people perhaps that did not come back after the COVID shutdown, or people perhaps who are leaving the workplace to work from home or have flexibility in terms of their work environments? We've also seen an increase of many of the baby boomers who are on the edge of retirement go ahead and decide now is the best time to retire. And it's created gaps in many industry sectors, especially in areas like healthcare, manufacturing in particular, construction workers, and most certainly in restaurant and food service workers. I want you to consider for a moment, not just in these industries, but across all industries, what is the impact of worker shortages in organizations, and how do worker shortages really influence occupational health and safety? When we consider the risks associated with worker shortages in occupational health and safety, what we tend to find, and this is the reality we see today in many organizations, is that individual workers are doing more. They're working longer hours, and that includes those who are working from home. It's not unusual to hear that workers that are working from home, where in the past maybe they put in 8 to 10-hour days, are putting in 12, 14, even 16-hour days, round-the-clock Zoom meetings. More overtime, and possibly that overtime is not always being recognized or compensated. People who are new or unfamiliar with processes or equipment because they are filling in for a coworker that may be out sick, and folks who are not fully trained. Now, when we consider all of those risks from an occupational health and safety standpoint, look at the impacts that this has on your workers. Overwhelm, split attention. That sounds like a recipe for incidents to occur. Fatigue, lower morale, and even injury to self and others, as well as damage to equipment. One of the things we tend to find too is that organizations, in their haste to fill open positions or to cover the work that needs to get done, they don't always take the time to make workers aware of occupational health and safety risks that may be relevant to the jobs that they're being asked to perform. So if we look at the problem as worker shortages, we'd like to recommend that the solution is an occupational health and safety management system that's based on ISO 45001. And why we recommend that is ISO 45001 not only has that key focus on worker consultation and participation, but the foundation for ISO 45001 is the systematic identification of hazards and risks related to the work that's being done in the organization, and then the determination of controls that help to manage those risks, in best case, eliminating them, and at the very least, at minimum, putting in place administrative controls or even the necessary personal protective equipment to reduce risks to workers. As we consider this worker shortage, certainly one process in organizations that's getting a lot of exercise is onboarding. We're bringing in new people, whether it be temporarily or perhaps hiring a whole new set of workers as we change processes in our organization. And this is creating a lot of chaos in terms of occupational health and safety. In fact, we like to say that right now, occupational health and safety success is really a moving target. Those metrics that we traditionally focus on, although outcome-based and relevant, are not what's most important. We really need to make sure that our organization is thoughtful and proactive in establishing an occupational health and safety culture that recognizes emerging risks and also realizes that the interested parties for occupational health and safety relative to the organization have expanded way beyond the traditional workers and considering other interested parties that may have expectations influencing how our organization addresses occupational health and safety. And then, of course, we also need to keep in mind that because of emerging conditions like COVID, regulations related to occupational health and safety are also constantly changing. So therefore, we need to make sure that our organization's onboarding process is recognizing those risks, expectations of interested parties, and those regulations, and preparing our workers accordingly so that they can be successful, not only in getting the job done, but doing so in a safe and healthy manner. Specifically to onboarding, there's 3 requirements that you'll find in ISO 45001. In fact, these requirements are common across all ISO standards, but essential in the case of occupational health and safety is making sure that we take the time to develop competencies related to occupational health and safety, especially for new workers, whether they're temporary or permanent, or workers that are filling in or transferring from another process. In particular for competencies, it's absolutely essential that workers are aware of process-specific hazards and risks associated with the work that they're being asked to perform. We also want to make sure that they're aware of the risk controls that have been designed into those processes to overcome those hazards and risks, and that they're utilizing those risk controls properly on an ongoing basis. We may also have additional controls and monitoring, in particular because of COVID, for instance, that are being put in place. And it's very important that people are properly trained about those controls and the expectations regarding ongoing monitoring. One of the best practices that we've recognized for organizations who are faced with the current worker shortage, as well as these changing conditions because of COVID, is introducing something called a safety buddy. And the safety buddy is really acting as a coach and helping new workers or transferred workers really understand the expectations around occupational health and safety, reinforcing the importance of that culture of occupational health and safety, and also responding to questions and concerns that new workers may have about their workplace. From an awareness standpoint, organizations are really obligated to ensure that safe work practices, especially related to COVID, are widespread, available, communicated, and reinforced on an ongoing basis. Information, not just about COVID, but any health and safety risks, needs to be easily accessible to all workers. And we also want to make sure that we recognize awareness is really a two-way street. It's not just the leadership of an organization communicating their expectations, but also engaging their workers in their understandings and their concerns. This is really bringing about a lot more opportunity for consultation and participation related to occupational health and safety in our workplaces. And finally, communication. Well, this is certainly a big topic, and in fact, of all of the processes and organizations that have probably gotten the greatest elevation as a result of COVID, communication is probably at the top of the list. Hopefully, organizations have been learning over the past year and a half the importance of ongoing communication, but also making sure that communication is transparent, multimodal, meaning that we're using a lot of different avenues so that we respond to different listening learning styles that can be visual or verbal or even kinesthetic. Visual communications are always the best because people will remember images a lot more. And then making sure that communication is adapted to changing conditions in the workplace as well as outside of the workplace, so workers feel that they are clear in understanding their expectations and have a gateway for communicating their concerns back to the organization. We'd like to wrap up with just some information about future trends in occupational health and safety. Hopefully what we've shared with you so far today has given you some thought about how the worker shortage and COVID may have impacted your organization's occupational health and safety management system, and perhaps the need for formalizing an occupational health and safety management system within your organization. I will tell you what we've seen over the past year and a half has been a recognition by so many organizations across virtually every industry sector that occupational health and safety is more than just the traditional accounting for incidents and making sure people are wearing their PPE. We're finding that the most successful organizations navigating through the COVID crisis, as well as the current worker shortages, are those that have embedded occupational health and safety into their organizational culture. They're a lot more attractive for new workers, and they're also able to retain existing workers because those workers are really engaged as part of the business's focus on occupational health and safety, and they feel that they're being looked out for. This also means that organizations really have to take a very proactive and preventive stance in how occupational health and safety is managed inside of their organization. No longer can an organization get away with occupational health and safety being an extra task for the HR department or a one-man department within the organization. Occupational health and safety really has to permeate all aspects of the business, and it must be inclusive in order for workers to want to stick around. There's also a great trend, and in fact, we saw this in the ISO 45000 or ISO PAS 45005, that guidance document I mentioned to you earlier, touches upon workplace well-being and even psychological risks associated with COVID. So now we're finding that many workers are expecting their employers to not just take care of occupational health and safety from a physical health standpoint, but also a mental health standpoint. And this is something that has not been talked about a whole lot, especially in certain industry sectors. And COVID has certainly opened up the dialogue around mental health and psychological risks in the workplace as well. Workers are expecting a positive work environment, and quite frankly, they have a lot more options now in terms of how and where they can work. So creating that work environment that's attractive and taking care of the workers' mind and body is something that's really going to be an expectation going forward. Workplace well-being is also about workers being able to demonstrate their competency and really contribute. And we hear especially the younger generation saying that that's their table stakes for working inside of organizations today, as well as having a work-life balance. We wanted to share with you a new standard that ISO has recently released, the ISO 45003. And this is a guidance document, again, that supports ISO 45001 on occupational health and safety. But this new standard provides a focus around psychological health and safety in the workplace and how specifically organizations can manage psychosocial risks. This is really about promoting well-being at work, a huge expansion of our understanding of occupational health and safety traditionally. Fortunately, this document is well aligned with ISO 45001 for organizations that have already implemented ISO 45001. This is really the next step in expanding the scope of occupational health and safety and embedding a culture of employee focus and well-being as part of their operations. You can access ISO 45003 by visiting the website www.iso.org. Arshad, I think I'll turn it back over to you so you can share a little bit more information about ISO 45001.
Thank you, Kathy. And I would like to start with the structure of the 45001 standard. So whatever Kathy described in her slides regarding the workers participation and consultation, and how this 45,001 going to map over those requirements. So I'll be specific with respect to the clauses of the standard, which exactly are the clauses that will be addressing all of that. So let me start first with the explaining the structure of the 45,001 standard. So it has a typical 10 clause structure, starting from 1 scope till 10 improvement. And this structure is called a high level structure. So if you look at the other 9,000 and 14,001 standards, you will find a similar structure. And that is the approach ISO has taken to keep the structure same so that organizations can manage multiple management systems at the same time. So the philosophy behind this 10 clause structure is that out of that 1 till 10, starting from 4 till 10 are the clauses where the requirements for a particular management systems are laid down. That means the 4 till 10 clauses are auditable clauses. When the external people will come to audit, or when you are going to do the internal audit, you will be focusing on 4 till 10th clause. So the philosophy behind 4 till 10 is a very famous plan, do, check, and act cycle, which is a Deming cycle. Deming is a Japanese quality award. So out of that, the 4, 5, 6, and 7, these are all planning clauses. So when you plan a management system, you basically, the planning steps and the planning requirements are all laid down between 4, 6, and 7. 7 is kind of overlap between planning and action. So the do part, that is covered between 7 and 8. And then check is all described in the 9th clause, which mainly contains the internal audit, performance evaluation, and management reviews. And then the 10th clause, which talks about the improvement, the correction, and the corrective actions. So that's a basic theme that you will be finding against any of the management system standards, which is on a high level structure, as you can see on the slide. So I'm giving you a more exploded view now of the 45,001 standard. How does it look like? So these are all the subclauses that is contained within this 45,001 standard. So taking the discussion forward from Kathy's slide, that which are the clauses that are relevant to the human resources. And I can tell you one thing regarding the human resources, that what we say is that in a health and safety chain, human is the weakest link, because you really cannot make a human work and follow the rules and regulations unless there is a mindset to do it. So we really need to sell this idea to the people that they are doing it for their own safety and security to really make it happen on the ground. And that's why this 45,001, the new version especially, has come up with a few very interesting clauses, which I'm just going to highlight when I'll talk about the human element clauses. So the clauses that I'm about to represent, and I'm just going to highlight the numbers of it so that you can take a note of that. So the first clause that talks about the human element is the 5.3 clause, which lays down the roles, responsibilities, and accountabilities. So it clearly states that after laying down the roles and responsibilities, the responsibility to follow that thing on the ground lies with the workforce. So this is the requirement that has been defined within the 5.3 clause. Another clause that's a very, very strong clause and is the 5.4 clause. And what I can tell you about the 5.4 clause is that if you see the other standards like quality and environment 9,000 and 14,000, you will not find this clause there, because 5.4 is not the domain that's been addressed in the quality and the environment. This is a pure domain of health and safety. And why they have put it under the management is because they want the management to take care of this clause, that all the workers and the participation and consultation, they have been participated and consulted throughout the establishment of the health and safety management system. And this is basically the concept of owning the controls and owning the management policies and procedures for their own safety and security. So if I'm a worker, I would be, it is more likely to follow a rule and regulation in which I was part of developing, rather than something just coming from an HSC manager and I'm asked to follow that. So 5.4 is a very, very strong clause, only the feature of 45,001 standard, which talks in detail about consultation and participation. And it also specifies the requirement that those participation of the workers would be from the non-managerial staff. So 5.4 is another clause which discusses the details of engaging the workforce. Then, as was also highlighted by Kathy, the competence clause, which is the 7.2 clause. And there's a very interesting requirement in the new standard that when you evaluate or when you develop the competency of the people, there should be an ability, you need to evaluate that they have the ability to highlight the hazards. So most of the time, people working on the ground, they may not be aware of the type of hazards that they may face. So again, that lies with the organizations who first provide that information to the people, to the workforce, so that they can be able to highlight, they can be able to give the inputs to the management about the hazard. So that is one of the competency clauses, and the other clauses that Kathy also highlight was the 7.3 clause is about the awareness. So this awareness clause is the major clause, and this clause and the under one communication, which is also 7.4, this goes in tandem. So you need to make people aware, and as she said, very rightly said, that this awareness is not a one-way street, it's a two-way street. So you need to provide them awareness, and they also need to give the inputs to the management that how the things are on the ground, and they are the best people to contribute to that. Other than that, there are other clauses which are very important clauses, which also places the foundation for the whole health and safety management system, starting from 6.1. So the 6.1 is all about risk assessment. So this helps the organization in understanding the current status of safety and security at their organization, or what are the risk levels, so that they can focus and they can prioritize their investment on the high risk areas. So 6.1 is a very, very strong clause which lays down the foundation and which lays down the planning foundation, that how do they need to go about the risk areas, and how do they need to prioritize to address the high risk areas within their organization. Logically speaking, after coming up with a list of controls and doing the risk assessment, the second element that comes into play is my 8.1, and this is one of the major clauses of the standard, which talks about all the implementation on the ground. This also defines a hierarchy of controls that the company may need to follow, that is described in 8.1.2 clause, which starts from elimination, substitution, engineering controls, administrative controls, and lastly, the personal protective equipment. So there's a hierarchy of controls that you need to adapt, and the standard specifies that 8.1. And this is all about the implementation that you will do on the ground based on the risk assessment that you do. And after the implementation, after the workforce implementation, then it comes the part of the HSE, the major HSE, to monitor the performance, to do the internal audit, to monitor the performance on weekly, fortnightly basis, how they are doing, if there are any lackings or if there are any issues or any deviations, so that they may take the corrective action right now. So this is basically the performance monitoring clause, which provides the monitoring over the whole implementation, 8.1 clause as a major. And if anything that may go wrong in that monitoring, the clause of 10.2 comes into play, which is all about the incident nonconformity and corrective action. So whenever things are going wrong, or whenever you are highlighting any nonconformity, or whenever you are taking a recommendation for improvement or a corrective action path, or in case of any incident, the 10.2 clause provides the whole incident management procedure, and that keeps the whole system intact, health and safety management system, and that also provides the opportunity for the lesson learned. Nevertheless, if we there's another clause which I also like to highlight, and you might be aware of that clause. That is my 8.2 clause, which is about emergency preparedness and response. So this also provides a very comprehensive system to the organization, considering all the possible emergency scenarios that could be relevant to that particular industry or the type of nature of business that you are in. And all that is I'm highlighting here, rather the whole standard is all tied up with one major clause, which is my 5.1, which is the leadership and commitment. So everything goes there. There's a very interesting clause, which is a new clause 5.1K, as in Kentucky, which describes that management is also responsible to make sure that there should not be any reprisal activity against the workforce which are raising voice or which are giving any inputs to the hazardous condition that is on the ground. So they have really made management responsible this time to cover up the workforce and ensure their participation and consultation throughout the health and safety management system. So as we emphasized a lot on that these are the workforce challenges that we are facing, and 45001 is a great way to address those workforce challenges, to make sure that your procedures, your induction procedures, your competency evaluation, and your continuous awareness and communication procedures are intact, so that we can have, even if we are not having a competent workforce, we can have an aware workforce, which we will convert into competence workforce into a short possible time to address our workforce challenges that we are facing right now. So with that, I like to let you know few courses that we are offering, the Bureau Veritas, and we are offering both the in-person and live virtual classes on all of that. So these are all the standards that we are covering. We are having a 45,001 course, both virtually and in person, in September and October. So you can check out our website, and you can contact our training coordinator, Ms. Cindy Haight, on these numbers for any in-person or calendar training, and we can arrange the training at your site as well. This is our training website, which is bureauveritastraining.com/US. So you can find all our training offerings there, and it has a training calendar also available, so you can download our 2021 training calendar if you go onto this website. So regarding this workshop, this has all been recorded, and we maintain a channel which is Bureau Veritas YouTube channel. So you write it on the YouTube, and that will take you to the all the webinars and workshops that we have been doing. They are all uploaded, and this one will also get uploaded there. So in case you want to rerun this thing or you want to refer it to anyone, you can always refer it through our YouTube channel. This webinar, this workshop will also be posted there. And if you may have any questions, even later on, you can always write on this email, which is bvcerttraining@bureauveritas.com. With that, I also like to let you know that the certificate will be offered for this workshop, and there is a link. You will be sent a mail with the survey link. So you need to provide that survey, and you will be awarded the certificate for this workshop and webinar. My email and my cell phone is also there. If you want to contact me directly, you can go ahead. You're more than welcome to contact me. And you can also contact Kathy of Custom in case you want to have any question related to her. You can contact her directly. So with that, I'd like to thank you all for listening to us. And I like to say, Kathy, to do the last wording, Kathy.
I appreciate you allowing us to share this timely information about worker shortages and how your occupational health and safety management system can support your business. Thank you.
Thank you all.